Hello, well. Welcome to the Dream Labs with Dr. Contrast Live. Really, just to take a moment here and thank you so much for those of you who are going to be tuning in. And I'm going to start here today's stream just with a little bit of a review. Going back to last Tuesday's program, what I want to really stress too, I want to thank you very much to those of you who tuned in last Tuesday on this Star Citizen long-range bomber study called the MANTA. Really appreciated some of the input you received and I received from you all going through the process of putting together some sketches, some concepts together. And since our last meeting on Tuesday of this week, I went back in and did some additional little studies here. We'll show you in a few moments, but I take a moment here and just go back to a bit of a review. And I'm going to start with this sketch primarily because this one really began to hit the nerve in terms of getting used to or starting to see the right proportion. As I said throughout the last 2 weeks and so forth, I started this whole process with this bomber in mind, but some of the first sketches looked much more fighter-like or interdiction systems or attack vehicles, and they weren't really bomber-like. The proportions and the scale were not quite right yet, and primarily because it's a new process for me to go through this, and to be a big learning curve as far as getting the right character and the right personality put together. So I'll have to say just a little bit of the histrionics. After going through a series of sketches that started this about 2 to 3 weeks ago, 3 sessions ago, it just dawned on me that, again, from your input and my own, looking at the sketches when they were done after the first session, they didn't have the same guts or girth that a bomber should have. So again, let's start here today. These are some sketches from last Tuesday of this week, putting together a process. I think this sketch I'm going to begin with to go through the process today, because I think it really helped me see, again, I think the proportions looked a little bit better. And the reason I felt that way about the proportions is, notice the cockpit area, much more diminutive, much smaller in scale. And again, the span of the wings are much more open and a lot more horizontal and a lot more battle girth to it. So I mean, a big difference as far as that scale. I think this sketch really, when I did this, when I thought, aha, this starts to get some content to it, has some real personality about becoming a potential bomber character or platform to work on. So once the plan view was done, I went back. It's a different element here. This is not the same design, by the way. But again, once I've got that done, what do you do with the girth? Because some of the early sketches of mine were real thin, really kind of gossamer and a bit clumsy. I'm not quite happy with all the elements here yet, but I think this scale, with a human scale added to it, really began to help. And no question, I think, pardon me, get this guy out of the way here. It really began to help in terms of seeing what the scale of this is as far as ground height, overall length, overall height, and some of the mass in here, for example, to really take care of what we're looking for as far as proportion was concerned. So, but I also think too, is it going to become, as I go through the process today and again into maybe next Tuesday to hopefully get to wrap it up or come close to wrapping it up. I'm not going to rush this. I'm going to do a really good job of getting a real good tactical bomber here put together, so we can put our hand on, or hang our hat on a really nice finished illustration series to get up on the website and go to poster graphics for consumption here. So, but I begin to really look at this. Do we want this thing to be more stealth-like, very geometric? Or we want to be very organic or very slippery and fluid? And there's a real conflict there as far as what I'm concerning myself with, as far as how do we want to take this thing? Because if you go too soft with it, it does not have the same gutty character. But if you go into too sheer, then it's a bit more of an abstraction. So as a result of that, that's where a lot of the time is being spent now, just going through the process of now we've got a plan form set, and the scales change, and we've got a lot more content to work with, and much more comfortable with it. Now let's get the scale down in terms of what is it? Is it sheer? Is it a combination of both, geometric and so forth? So let's go back through here and then just go through these sketches. So that's where we started. Then I went from that set again. Notice going back to again that same girth, still but maybe too fluid. Still very fluid in terms of being organic, and not quite, that combination. There's a little bit of shear through the engine nacelles, but a lot more of the organic system up in the canopy. And I think this, again, it doesn't hit all the cylinders yet, because, again, the canopy should be a lot smaller. If I'm going to get, and maybe reduce some of the mass down in the canopy area here too. So all these little tricks in the trade begin to play into the fact of getting this personality right. So I began to look at this sketch and put it in a little bit of perspective, not quite the same form, but the same idea of nacelles, moving the nacelles outboard on the wing surfaces, and then putting them into a little more geometric form as opposed to the roundness of the body form itself. So that was the next step we developed last Tuesday. Once that plan view I just showed you was established, then I went from that family into these, and all of a sudden things started to help. I think started to really kind of open up a bit here. The proportions started to change. I'm not quite sure yet about this scale here, but some of the character of this thing being a little bit lower and less bulbous, for example. You look at this, let's put them side by side here if we can. If we look at this variation on theme here, side by side, let me just drop these down just a bit. Notice how much mass there is here, that very strong blister up on top. But then notice these guys are a lot leaner and getting closer to being much more stealth-like or much more aggressive looking. So I think that was that was a good breakthrough for me to kind of see. So we get this back in plane here. So these kind of really took off on another different department. And again, I think another good challenge in this whole process too for me is looking at these manta booms, these cantilevers. How do you handle them to make them look right? I mean, am I making too much out of them? Did we kind of minimize them? Did we eliminate them altogether? Because it's not a bad form when you get that out of the way. It's not a bad form, but it's still not quite the same overall shape that we have for a bomber system here. But enough said. I think the proportions, again, are getting a lot closer to what we wanted to see, what I wanted to see from a bomber perspective, and it looked a lot healthier in terms of getting the wing girth, more horizontal, more spread, and then less profile or elevation study in the canopy area itself. So then move on to the next one, and I think now this one really started to help. This one really was a breakthrough in terms of, are we going to go organic? Is it more like this? I mean, this trail of starting out with a very, very fighter-like approach and changing the paradigm to more proportional bomber type has been really, I think, a good search for me and really putting things down, pinning things into a real bomber status. And I think this one really helped. The canopy is a lot slipperier. It's not as bulbous as the other sketches we just showed you. It also has a little bit more of this pullback on the intakes and the nacelles, and still has that same span in the plan form about having a very horizontal wingspan of a bomber type. And this front elevation was very helpful too to kind of get the character down. Again, notice very fluid here. Some sheerness, but again, back into some very organic form here. So it's a combination of both. And I think, again, putting it human scale, what's missing is as the rest of the wingspan. It's going to get a lot deeper, a lot longer as we go out there with it. So I think those were really helpful in terms of putting some pieces together. Again, much more in tune now. I think we're getting a lot closer to it. And again, this elevation really helped, this front elevation really helped to kind of set up a bit of a tone here. So from that, I went back to plan view. And again, a little bit too massive again. And it just all of a sudden, right, maybe making it too busy. I'm not sure if that's the case at all, but the busyness in terms of putting it together. And then going back and putting a little bit of value to it, see where the shapes are. And I think a lot more of this and bringing it back in and thinning that up a little bit and playing the body form up. It's going to be a lot healthier and stronger to kind of work with. And again, the variation of the theme going very extreme, very sheer here. Notice combination of both organic and sheerness. This is all very much stealth-like, very crisp and hard edged. So that another generation. Then I went back from those right back to elevation again, and all of a sudden I think started again. This page was very, very helpful. The plan view got a little bit better. Notice we thinned up a little bit here. The body mass stretched a little bit, so it gave it more a manta ray kind of a format to it. Interesting look here. But I think, again, a little bit slimmer in the cockpit area really began to help here. And then the nacelles up high in the wing form itself, and a lot of stretch in the wings itself. And again, this lower, playing down these mandible, these water flaps, for example, on the sea manta ray really kind of help put it back into concert for us here. And I think the other thing that's really unique too is really cool is that all of a sudden what I really kind of struck on was this one started to make some sense. Notice very aggressive, much flatter, much more lean. Again, much sheer in the engine nacelle and a lot crisper in the wing surfaces. All of a sudden, there's a lot more lift going on here. It had some personality to it that I thought was very, very helpful. So I think this was a real benchmark change of pace here, and as well as that plan view, not quite there yet, but again, getting a lot stronger with the overall proportion. When you see the other half, if I complete that full plan view study, a lot more bomber-like character. So I think that was really helpful to look at here. So now let's go back and now I'm on another page here. Went back to some elevations, and as well as that, some front elevations and some side view elevations. A bit clumsy back here, a lot of weight back, and it didn't really care for us. So but something happening up front here was interesting when you look at some of the engine nacelles and how that was beginning to work. Again, front elevation started to look very interesting in terms of a dual intake system here. And again, a combination of being very organic in some areas and very sheer, almost a little combination of both here. And then this one, I'm not quite pleased with the elevation, side view elevation, but again, notice the front elevation and really started took on some interesting character here. Again, the scale of the wingspan looked really good. As far as I'm concerned, I think it got a lot healthier with it. This was interesting, some of the cockpit areas and getting a lot leaner with it. And again, bringing the nacelles off the top of the body form was helpful too. And then bringing in a secondary nacelle down below. So we got a little sneaky with that. That had an interesting approach to it. So we get a perspective study, so some final renovations. If we go this route, I think that'd be a nice one to illustrate to see what it might look like in perspective from a front 3/4 overhead to take a peek at it here. So there we are with that guy. And that was very helpful to go through. And then all of a sudden, I just switched gears again and went into some perspective studies. So this is where it starts to get very, very interesting in terms of what we want to do with this guy. Overhead 3/4, and then just a little tighter again. Look how bulbous this is. I'd like to take this thing again and just kind of slim it down a little bit, which I did. I'll show you in a couple of sketches here as we go down the line here. But I think some of the things that are very interesting here about this guy, let me just do this. Let me get this out of the way here for a moment. And I'm going to bring in another pad. I want to put a little bit of tone to this thing. That's what we've got here. Let's kind of put this in some action. Just going to bring this around here. Let's get that out of the way. Just do something here just to kind of give a little bit of character to it, see what happens with it. So I think the proportions are really helpful. I just want to work with a very nice, simple, there's a light tones here to kind of get this thing washed in. Let's see what happens here. Just really kind of hit it with some real quick bursts. Regular fluid. Into the body form itself, and just kind of tone it in first. See what we've got. And I'll start defining some of the shapes in a moment here. But I think, noticing, I think what I really felt good about that was the actual scale looks a lot more bomber-like. It has some pretty interesting personality. Let's go back in and hit some of this stuff again here. A little bit of a tone change here. Some of the nacelle drops. Engine itself, the shadow. It's going to put a little bit of this into play. Catch a little bit of that catwalk. Cockpit area. Again, that scale. Now, notice, when we start to put a value to this thing, it starts to take on some personality of its own, which I think is very, very healthy. Let's do this. Let's get a little bit of high contrast in there, see what we've got here. Insert, nacelle, a little bit of a body change in through here. Let's kind of get that, let's knock that out so we can see what the surface changes are. Let's go back in and get this. Again, that's secondary. Other side, nacelle piece put together. Let's get a little bit of this canopy put in place. Go back and get this leading edge to kind of drop in just a bit. And take it on that front load. There. Into that. And again, light source come up on top here. Let's get this nacelle and shadow here. Now let's drop this right out here. One more top at it here. Extreme high contrast. And if you're watching this, please feel free to drop me a little bit of insight as to how you feel about some of the scale changes here we're looking at. Let's go back in here just for a moment. Let's go back to this number 1 gray. Get a little bit more tone on top of this engine nacelle here. Let's drop that out. That's in a bit of shadow here. No, what do you think? A little bit of tone to put this thing together here. Let's go back and just break this down. Just one more shot at it here. Let's get this body side to read a little bit more. Let's get this shelf in here. So it's kind of separate itself. That's where that little cantilever, that catwalk is going to be here to work with. There it is. That catwalk into that, and a little bit of shadow here. So there it is. Let's do this here. There's one little perspective study here in marking rough in terms of what that form might look like. I think it's interesting that we got some headway here. And let's go back in and make sure we don't get too much of this drop here. It's going to get this kind of softening off just so it can cast a shadow in there. Let's go back in there and just do a little ballpoint pen work, and we'll let that go here. It's going to get that shadow. Collar going around the cockpit area. The first Manta series we did. Isolate the cockpit a little bit. So many little moving parts in here. I think it's really unique in terms of how to deal with it. We want to really stress some of the features of this vehicle. Let's put this in place here. Let that shadow to work a little bit for us here. Now a little bit of definition up on top of these nacelles here. Drawing it back in, a little more definition to it really helps. And there it is, a little value study here about what the form might look like. Notice a very, very strong crown over the top of this shape. Comes up and it opens up a little bit and just kind of spearheads out just a touch here. Let's go back into this, a little bit more definition inside this guy too. That comes up to that spear, back into the center line. It comes out of here again, and then that same process, you pick up that same dark aspect right here. We have a bit of a wishbone in there, which I think is kind of intriguing. And again, drop that out just a bit more. And bring this forward just a bit more. And there it is. That's just one approach to this whole new look from where we were last Tuesday. By getting this shape to read a little bit stronger for us. So let's just do the same thing here with this guy. What do we want to do with this? A little softer, but much more outboard on the wing surface itself. So it kind of spreads it out just a bit more. A little canopy graphic. And again, some of these introduction systems, these booms, and see what that does. Let's come back in here and just kind of knock this out with a little bit of surface work here. In the shadow, drop it out of there. And get that catwalk to read a little bit more. Put that into play. So it comes down to the nose cone here. There it is. Let's get this little bit of this underbelly put together here. So it's this. Into this, into that. Shadow. A little more form into this thing. And it's really knocked that lower out, just a bit more depth into this thing. The detail there. A bit of shadow up this sponson here. Again, shadow off of that. And there's another little study on just, again, looking at what these forms might look like in terms of going extremely sheer and separate the nacelles out of the wing surface itself. And then again, a little bit more organic in there, a little softer, and moving the nacelles outboard just a bit more on the wing form itself. I think they've got some good proportion there. I'm not really quite there with the design yet, but I think the proportions are getting better. There's a lot more character becoming involved in seeing. I think I keep using the term character and personality, but I think that's got a lot to do with it. This whole concept has really built on this very gutty looking stealth-like bomber type, or this organic bomber type that's a very massive in form and massive in scale. It has a real personality to it that looks lethal. So let me go back here just for a moment. A little bit of detail here. Knock the side of that cockpit out just a bit. And again with this. Little things. Have more definition or detail in the body itself. And there we go, just little odds and ends. But again, exercises here for me today is to take advantage of that. Not that we've found a bit of a formula to put this thing in the real, what I call personality of a bomber that's got some real scale and girth to it. Very interesting set of circumstances now, and just looking at some perspective, what abouts. Let's put that aside for a moment here. But before I do, hold on a second. So that guy is out of the way, and let's take a look at this. Another family of short shapes I did too as well was this. Just looking again, different variations on theme. Once we've got the scale down, here's a series of sketches here that kind of, let's take this out of the way. Sorry about that. But let's take this into account here. Just again, notice a lot of variation, and now we've got a form to deal with. I was really concentrating between last Tuesday and today about getting a lot more flexibility in some of these things and doing a lot more exploratory sketches. And just putting in, let me just put in some basic surface here so you can see what we're talking about. Let's kind of flood them in just a bit here. Just to get enough body in some of these shapes to work here. Yeah, so a little more tone in here. Just to stain it in to see what we've got. Engine nacelles out on the wing itself, really deep back in the plan form itself. Get cockpit. Underbody. Let's go back and get a little bit more depth in this thing now. The cockpit area. Let's put a little bit more tone in this thing. Let's give it a number 3 and put a little more graphics into this guy. The shadows. Back in here, get a little bit more, some lighter value in here. Shadow definition in there. Let's see the canopy cleared up here. Let's get this all set up. The number 6 grade, but more depth in this thing for us. Let's draw back a little more definition in this thing. Much more organic this shape is, much more fluid. Yeah, just looking at some personality here. How much more fluid that one is, just in terms of body form, just a lot more graceful. Again, the engine systems or nacelles way out there, and getting some spread to this thing, and a pretty interesting approach here. Just kind of go through another one here and just put together a little bit of a run. Let's go back and put a little bit of stain into this thing. This got a little bit more geometric, so let's see what happens with this guy here. Again, very simple surfaces. Just want to knock them in here just a little bit. Let's get the body graphics out of the way here. Let's put a little bit of tone in here. Nacelle again, outboard. Same thing here. Let's get this underbody squared away here. And to form a little bit more girth, a little bit more weight. underneath here, just pardon me, upside down. Oops, let's go back at this thing. Cockpit area. Again, this take a little bit of this, put this guy back together here. We'll just keep moving along here, gang. So far, so good. I mean, it's just been a lot of fun to see. We're looking at the variation and theme here already. We've got some interesting things going on in terms of variations and looking at what might be taking place with some of these body forms and just looking through some really interesting shapes. And today, again, this very candidly, today was an exploratory day after last Tuesday, going through the plan form and getting some changes made in the strength of the plan form and perspective and the wingspan out there and the engine setup and some of the cockpit areas and some of the body language, much better. So we go back in and just kind of fill in some blanks here, guys. We'll just keep moving ahead. Just want to do a series of value studies first before we go back in and do anything that might be related to color system or rendering process here. Once we find that magic, it'll be really neat to work with here. Let's kind of put a little bit of this back into here. So there it is. Where's the light source? That tones back again. Just a little bit of a core line coming through this body form here. Let's kind of take that into play. Let's kind of drop that out just a bit more dramatic with it. There it is. Now let's come back in and get some of this to reread here. Some of this nacelle drop here. That in place. We drop out the engine intake. More canopy definition. And just a little bit more drawing back into this thing. Get some definition down. Well, there's another study here, just a little 3/4 front. And again, looking at exploratory systems for cockpit engine location, span of the wings, and so forth. A lot of good sketch information here. So let's do one more little study here. It's going to knock this guy out. Then we'll move along here very rapidly. Thank you so much for your patience. Let's get the underbody in place here. Turn this upside down for a moment. This one kind of pulls the engine nacelles up against the body form itself, at the upper, and just hugs it in against the body itself. We're just going to really kind of pull that in very quickly here. So let's kind of get back and get a little bit of tone to it. Little surface work in here. And some canopy definition here. Nice L work. Now we can put a little bit of heat to this thing. A little bit of tone in here. And there's another little value study here, just looking at certain forms and shapes about what this B7 or Monterey could look like, this long-range bomber. Just, again, spraying the engines out, bringing them back inboard, tucking them against the fuselage. Variations on theme, just a good day to explore the operation we're working with here. As a result of, again, getting some good feedback on Tuesday about what this platform is going to look like. And it's a huge difference in terms of getting things put together. The struggles I had early on were, as I said, proportion and more like a fighter than a bomber. And all of a sudden started to break through on Tuesday with more proportion change, like the sketch I showed you when we started the stream today. So much more power in terms of putting that piece together. And let me just do something here to kind of clarify this little shape here. Hold on a second. Let's do a bit of an insert piece here. There we go. A little bit more legible in terms of where that shadow form is breaking up in this nacelle here, coming into the body form itself. So variation is very slim, a little bit taller in the body form, and again sleeker again. And the issue is it going to become a combination of stealth or organics and sheerness, or is it all going to be stealth? I mean, those are the decisions I've got to make here. And very shortly in terms of putting together some of the final pieces to go to here. So let's kind of put this aside for a moment. Let's just do this. And last but not least, we're just going to bring up to speed on some things done here on a larger scale. After those studies were done, I went back and did some pencil sketches, looking at some of the themes that we're working with earlier here. Not unhappy with what we had here, for example, both these sketches. I've got to pull this out. Not unhappy at all with the progress being made here, but again, just not a matter of being unsatisfied. It's a matter of making sure we're doing a lot of exploratory work here to get the right character set. So these studies are done. This one initially we just did today. Then we just wrapped up this one. So those two were done. Then went right back in again and said, well, what if we start looking at maybe some more massive planform studies here? Larger engines, more wingspan, getting a lot wider with this. And again, notice a lot sheerer here, a lot of slope in this one, and a lot quicker in this one. So I'm going to save this one for another day here. I just want to let you see where the development's going. And then I went from that series to say, okay, what does it look like from one variation, for example? What might it look like from the rear three-quarter? So I went in here and did a real quick pencil sketch of a rear three-quarter study of this guy. Again, it changes character from view to view. It's really amazing how much it changes when you go from one element of concept work to another. It doesn't really belie some of the sketches we're doing here. Let's bring these back in for a moment. It doesn't belie some of the sketches we're doing here. In fact, there's a lot of relationship one to the other here, so we get these guys to work. A lot of relationship front three-quarter to rear three-quarter, and the same with these, the front three-quarter and some of these relating to the rear three-quarter. Now, once we find the right theme, then we can start coming in and saying, you know what, this is going to be really, this is the right approach to take. I think this, from my point of view, this sketch began to really tell us what the proportions started to look like. Real slim. Notice I really compressed the cockpit area and brought that shape down a little bit and really opened up this nacelle, brought the engines back a little bit, and really got a good wingspan on this thing and opened it up so it's much more girth-like, a lot healthier in terms of a scenario is concerned for a really gutted operation as far as putting all the pieces together. So I think that was really good to see how that comes together here. So I think it's interesting that the front three-quarters, I spent a lot of time front three-quarter, plan view elevations, walking around the shape itself, but not really addressing the tail graphics yet, or the rear end of this thing. And I'm not sure that this is where we want to end up, but again, I just want to take a look at it from the rear three-quarter rear. What are we working with here? If we go back to a body form that's extremely undulating, but a little bit more on the shear side, how do we terminate it back here? And what are the processes that we're going to go through? Do we want to blunt it off, a bit more girth back there, more stack? The idea here, exhaust in, air in, for example, exhaust out. Do we want to be a little more massive back here? Do we want more thickness to it back here? Do we want to lift this up a bit more? Still exploring some of those possibilities as we go down the line here. I think it's a good idea. I think we've got a good handle on that cockpit being a little less organic, a little more sheer, but it has some personality to it to give it the kind of guts we're after. But I think that section study helped too, where it came in very, very, a little bit roundness, back to sheer, back to up here, back to sheerness again. So that combination of sheer and organic and very fluid, organic and extremely crisp, started to help clarify what the shape is doing. So from that line, I went and redrew it and went back into this. Notice a couple of variations and changes here. If I can get them both in the same place. Notice this is a much more fantail approach back here for exhaust with this dart behind it. So I went back and modified that to more of this look. where we have this very strong organic shape back here with this power module and the exhaust system coming out of that. A lot softer in here. Notice how much more facet there is in this guy. And this became a lot softer in terms of engine nacelle. It just opened it up a little bit more, so it softened it up a bit. So it has some interesting personality to it. I'm not quite sure if it's the right way we want to fly yet. And this is where I really need your help and input. If you look at the stream later on today or review this, I would really appreciate your vote on which approach we want to take with this thing. Does this look substantial enough? Do we have enough guts in this thing to make this beauty work? Do you like the form itself? Are you in favor with the sheerness and the combination of both being sheer and at the same time organic? I think there's a lot there to really move with, and I think that's a real strong strength here. So I'm going to do something here very quickly. Let's just switch gears and go into a little pencil study and just put some value into this thing and see what we come up with here. So just bear with me here. Again, with the light source coming in from the upper left-hand side, we're going to get some of this to work in. Tone that back just a bit. Maybe a little more surface back in through here. And a lot of line thrust out of this guy. And catch a little bit of that edge. Again, a little bit of highlight coming off the top of that form. Shadow. Notice how I'm following the section work here. Just into that little bit of a highlight. Again, do a recess here. Back into highlight, down on that skid. That's going to get this shape to really kind of read into that cockpit area there. Comes back into nacelle, down through here. Again, a little bit of an insert piece here. Air exhaust. Put that into play. Again, really play this line weight up. Get that into place here. Again, let's kind of reverse this just a bit. Working with the light source. Into that platform. A little deeper. And again, let's get the cockpit in place here. And this is going to be, that's a telltale sign to me. The scale of the cockpit and what the character looks like from this view tells us if we've got the right proportion scale. And I think that looks pretty good as far as overall scale is concerned. I mean, we've got some interesting things going on here. Let's go back and get this. Again, a little shadow coming off of that nacelle piece. So it's going to look like that. It's going to come forward and curl back into that body form, into the edge of the wing itself. Again, just a real soft, there's a break here. So this portion as it goes forward will have a little more of this tone to it. Let's distinguish that one shape from one to the other. Let's get a little bit of highlight here where the light source is coming from. Now notice again, a little bit of a break here. So this is positive and then negative. So it's going to be a little bit of shadow here. Into tone, back to normal surface. Back again to normal surface. A bit of detailing through here. And just a little bit of crossover here, real softly. We'll kind of come up that hill into that wing form. And we'll let that line kind of just break through it here. Ready to find that exhaust strake in through here where that separation is. Back in through here. Not so much on this side. This is all going to be in the light source. Maybe a little bit of a drop in there because it's got a little bit of negative canter to it because of the section. So it's going to have a little bit of that to it. And again, just very simple. Let's bring the light source across the wing form itself so you see which direction it's coming from. Just a real quick pencil sketch here to give me a little bit of direction on where do I want to take the values on this guy when we finally get a good resolve in the forms that we're looking for here. So now it's that, into that. A bit of recess in this little air chute here. Let's put a little bit of indication on where that's doing. Like a nose step, a bit of fuel valve here. And let's play with that line form coming into that nacelle piece. Get that highlight to read for us. It's a real good strong value study here. Away from the light source, just a real touch. There's a little bit of shadow in here, just enough shadow right there, a little highlight to kind of come through that form to let it read for us here. So there we are. Get the underbody of this thing. Exhaust straight. Now let's go back and get this to 1, 2, 3, 4. Same thing on this side. Now let's seesaw it here. Let's get that to kind of come into play. And again, this little ventilation system here, get that to work. And make sure I don't make a mess of my hands here. And there it is. I mean, there's a little pencil sketch here, gang, about what this thing might look like in a Earth 3/4 study. So I think we're starting to get some really headway here as far as the content of being bomber type, having a nice set of proportions in terms of being very organic in some areas and extremely fluid in others. And I think we need to do one more thing. Let's cast a little bit of shadow off of this nacelle here, of this wing form here. Real subtle, but it's going to be there. Let's get this get this line right up just a bit more. And if we can get this to work, let me see if we can borrow a little bit of this lead and kind of put a little bit of tone in this thing. Yeah, there you go. Airbrush it almost. There you go. It's a little bit of value study to get us started here with this thing. Give it a little bit of personality to it. See if we can get some of this. Yeah, there you go. Almost a. And take a little bit of an eraser, a little bit of cloud pattern back there to kind of give it some atmosphere. So come on, let's just drop that down just a bit. So what do you think? I mean, are we getting closer here? If you take a look at this thing today, again, please drop me a note at my website, jim@drcontrast.com. I would love to get your input on what this thing is doing, how you feel about it. Let's get a bit of cloud pad in here. Just gonna get this, erase this back just a bit. And let me get this brush out. We'll kind of get rid of that just a bit. And let's blow this a little bit further here. And again, pour a little more of this tone. And get a little deeper with it, if we can, or else just take more out of it. Let's try that. And that just about does it. I mean, we're getting close to this thing. It's becoming a real venture in terms of intrigue for me. I mean, I'm not discouraged at all. I think we're making some real progress in getting the input put together. And I think that the secret, the real solution I'm looking for is something that has a lot of that same, that bomber character. It's not as rugged, it's evil looking, but it's also very organic and extremely elegant, if that's a possibility here. But getting the proportions right, to me, are really critical in terms of getting that all put together. So let's go back and get this thing sharpened a bit here. A little more definition in this, some of those line weights here, where that brake is, where that is, and where that comes back into that platform right there. So there we are. A little more definition in some of these line weights here. Well, I think that should do it for today here, gang. Let me just do this. And we'll just kind of call that a session and getting a little bit further down the road with getting this bomber process resolved. So I think, again, let's go back to a couple of these sketches here. This was the first line study we did here on the overall rear three-quarter, which I think was really helpful to get that all squared away. And prior to going into that, did a couple of little thumbnail sketches here just with some marker roughs on once we got the actual scale down a little bit and opened up the wingspan and put some engine systems together. Look, there's a front three-quarter on this thing, a little bit of overhead, a little bit more direct head-on, and just variations on theme. And this plate, just putting some pieces together here to kind of look at what we've got with regard to the overall surfaces that we're dealing with and the character we're looking for. One more thing here, pardon me. So that led to those studies, in addition to some of the review things we did here today, led to this line study eventually. I mean, there's a lot of things back here. I'm going to go back and through them again, but an awful lot of what ifs and how comes that really kind of put the pieces together. And I think I think that started to do some interesting things. This whole idea here, not bad, a little bit too bulky there. Then all of a sudden, I think this one had some merit to it. This was started at all. That almost takes on the same character that we have in this area here. I got less bulbous with it, got a little more streamlined with it. So I think that was a very helpful set of circumstances. And all that to say that we ended up today with, again, some little marker roughs on trying to get into some perspective, because I feel much more confident now with the fact that we're on the right track as far as getting a bomber is concerned. Let me get this out of the way here, pardon me. Getting a bomber kind of established and that appearance looking pretty solid here. And again, these were very, very helpful. Once again, extremely helpful. And I think there's so many ways to go here. There's some interesting things happening in these sketches. Not that they're well done, but again, I'm looking for personality and character. And I think we can really move into this thing and exercise some real flexibility. Next week, we'll go back and pick this process up. And then I ended up, for example, with this line form. I want to see what the sections we're doing in this overall plan form from the rear three-quarter. What are we looking at? So I did a little section study first, then moved from section study into a little black and white pencil sketch about where we are with this whole idea. So that's where we are today, gang. I really appreciate the time taken to join me here today. If you look at the stream later on, please drop me a note at jim@drcontrast.com. I always look forward to your input, especially in this one. I think, again, have we made progress? My question to you is, have we made progress? Are we looking at some things that are very interesting in terms of making sure we have the right concept down? Are we moving closer to the right resolve? So very interesting things taking place here. So thank you, gang, for the time today. And again, please also visit my website at drcontrast.com. There's a drawing program that you might find very interesting. As far as the content is concerned, there's 9 drawing lessons there that might be of some value to you. And if you do choose to join that, I think it'll be very helpful for you. And let me know how you feel about the program. We're building some things on the website, getting into some apparel work coming up very shortly here with automotive, and some of this material we get in print form and t-shirt form into the website itself. So it's going to be a very interesting set of circumstances here. And we'll pick this thing up again on this coming Tuesday and kind of get a little deeper into the final resolve of what these forms are starting to look like, what we want them to do. And we'll move into some fine illustration, get into some full color work and some presentation pieces as a result of this what I refer to as a Star Citizen Long Range Bomber Manta B7 study. So I don't know if we're going to different name on that thing, but we're getting there closely to it. So there we are, gang. Again, thank you so much for joining me today. Again, jim@drcontrast.com. Visit drcontrast.com, and hopefully we'll have some feedback for you on some drawing work and the like that'll be helpful to you. And last but not least, I will sign off with this because it's the most important part of the day. Thank you again for tuning in. I want to thank you for your input over the past few days in this program. It's been very helpful to me. And last but not least, never forget to remember to dare to be great, because you are. Thanks very much, gang. We'll see you Tuesday, and have a great weekend and all the very best. Thank you.